never see it.
Hello and welcome. Let me get my stuff together. Okay. Sorry, I was in a bit of a rush there. I thought I was gonna be done. Do you guys hear my fan blowing really loudly? Is that an issue? It's hot as balls right now, so it is hot. It is really hot. In my place. However, aside from that, I am here. Sorry that took a while. Is my voice feeling better? Yes. I had like chest congestion, and then I took an allergy pill today, and now I'm fine. That cleared it right up, actually. You don't hear the fan? Okay. Wow, okay, good. That means I got my settings right, finally. Wow, that's great. Because I have this fan blowing, and then also my PC. My PC fans are super loud, too. I'm kind of slowly working on building a new one. So hopefully soon, I'm going to be able to build a new PC. And having a quiet PC is probably going to be like gonna be at like the very forefront of everything I'm trying to do with my next build, and just making sure I have a decent GPU in there, and I can edit stuff and it can run all the latest games at least 1440 and like 90 frames per second, you know. That's the goal. It's actually kind of funny, right? Because I always see that meme resurface. The meme gets used again and again, but I saw it again today where someone was like, oh yeah, PC is better than PS5. And then like, it's that iRobot meme, right? Like PC is better than PS5, but then they're like, is your PC better than PS5? And I'm like, dude, most PC gamers, PC is better than all consoles. And I'm not even talking about high end, by the way. I'm talking about like just like an average build. Most PC gamers have like better builds than like whatever the current gen console is. Consoles maybe only have the edge for like the year that they come out. And then pretty much after that, I mean, even then, right? Most PC gamers will still kind of be ahead depending on what kind of GPU they have. So I think the PS5 is equivalent to like an RTX 2080, I think. And like most PC gamers I know have a better GPU than that, right? So it's just always kind of funny when that gets thrown around as like a thing. Anyway, I do love PC as a platform. I love it even more now that I have a Steam Deck. Shout out to my boy Nico for plugging me in with one. A great deal with one. It's a 2070? Yeah. Yeah, the average PC gamer has a GPU way better than that. Average Steam gamer is running a 3060 from the April survey? Yeah. Unless you're living in like, because I know in some countries, like I used to have a friend from Brazil and he told me that like over there, like the taxes were kind of hard. So some people had like, you know, GPUs that were not necessarily the latest. But if you're living in like, the US or the UK, like anywhere in Europe or North America or something, you probably have a pretty decent GPU. Right? And I mean, think about it, right? The Steam Deck is running a 1060 and it's able to run PS4 games, right? And when did the 1060 come out? Like, how old is that now? That's been a while. Yeah, that's a graphics card from 2016, right? And that can run like God of War and like all this other stuff. So yeah, if you have like a 1060, you know, people are still playing the latest games on that. And that's an 8-year-old graphics. Yeah, the Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 can run on a Steam Deck. And the Steam Deck is based on a 1060 GPU from 8 years ago. And then like we have to hear about how Series S was like struggling to run it basically, and they had to like do all this memory stuff. Yeah, 1060 was also the budget card for that year as well, right? So yeah. So basically, all of that is to say, like, whenever people say that, like, is your console stronger? I mean, is your PC stronger than X console? It probably is. It probably is. PC hardware tends to be a lot faster. But the thing is that consoles also, though, they have their advantages too. Games tend to be optimized better for them. And so a lot of the times what happens with PC is that when a game is poorly optimized, you just have to raw hardware power out the bad optimization. So that is to say, even though it doesn't necessarily run well, you can buy, a graphics card that is basically, metaphorically a nuclear weapon and just nuke the thing out of existence, and it'll still perform well, right? So, you put it on like a 4080 or 4090, and eventually the bad optimization kind of levels out. So, yeah, hydrogen bomb versus the optimized coughing baby. That's very true, unbiased fanboy. Yeah. So anyway, that's a rant about PC gaming and how I want to do a new build soon. But anyway, the reason I am here today and the reason that you are here today is I want to talk about Square, and I want to talk about what the future of Square Enix is going to be. So there has been a lot of stuff happening recently, between the layoffs, between what's happening in the broader gaming industry with Xbox and those layoffs and those studio closures, and the entire shift that's happening in the game industry right now, which is pretty tremendous. There's a lot of stuff going on. We also have Switch 2 coming up. In terms of Square specifically, this is the first time in a while that it feels like there isn't like a big announced Final Fantasy title, right? Because usually pretty soon after, we're already looking forward to the next big thing from FF, right? So, take for example, when Final Fantasy 15 came out, we already had Final Fantasy 7 Remake announced. When Final Fantasy 7 Remake came out, a few months later, they announced Final Fantasy 16, right? Final Fantasy 16, in the middle of Final Fantasy 16 development, they said, okay, we're also doing Rebirth. Rebirth is also coming out. And it's like, cool. And we got Rebirth. Like 9 months or so after, however many months, I think it's like 8 or 9 months after Final Fantasy 16. Incredibly close window for two major Final Fantasy titles. And now we're at this place where it's like, what's next? What are we doing next? FF is kind of a mystery right now. We don't really have anything firmly announced outside of Dawn Trail. Of course, we know that 7R Part 3 is coming, and we know that the heavily rumored Final Fantasy IX remake is coming. And those are kind of the two big things happening with Final Fantasy. Are we seeing Dragon Quest XII this summer? I know it's been internally delayed, but they could share something. I don't think we're seeing Dragon Quest XII this year. And I think we're lucky if we see Dragon Quest XII next year. I think Dragon Quest XII is really going through it. I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon. Speaking of Dawn Trail, did you see the job action trailer? I did. The Dawn Trail hype has not really set in for me quite yet. The reason is, I think there's two reasons. The first reason is that Endwalker was kind of this perfect conclusion to the existing story for me. I really, really loved how Endwalker concluded ultimately, and it just left me with that sense of completeness from FF14's story. And then the second part of that is that I don't think anything that's really been happening in the post Endwalker story, I don't think anything has really gotten me to the point of where I'm like, oh my god, I really, really need the next saga in FF14. Now, I'm not down on FF14, clearly. I'm just saying that it hasn't done anything yet to truly make the hype go insane for me. I really think that in the case of Dawn Trail's hype is going to set in when I'm actually playing it. When my PC boots up and I'm playing Dawn Trail and I get to like the first dungeon and we're starting it and I hear the quest acceptance noise and you know, chat's going crazy and we're all having a good time. I think that's going to be like when Dawn Trail kind of hits for me. But right now, Dawn Trail is kind of just... Dawn Trail is like a fancier A Realm Reborn. I don't mean to downplay it like that. But it is the start of a new saga. And so as the start of a new saga, you know, I feel like it's not going to go in, obviously, with the same sort of hype as Shadowbringers or anything like that. And so I'm going to be really curious to see how they make this saga something that grips us in the same way, right? And they have the benefit now of hindsight of the previous saga to really know, like, hey, you know, people really started to latch on to, you know, the Heidelin Zodiac arc around Shadowbringers. And so, you know, maybe we can have like a little bit of planning to make this arc a lot more appealing from the beginning in a way that A Realm Reborn really didn't. And so that's kind of like what excites me about Dawn Trail potentially. So, yeah, I'm not down on Dawn Trail, but I'm not up on it currently. I just think the Dawn Trail, like, it's just really going to be one of those experiences that Dawn Trail will excite me the most when I'm actually playing it. I think that's like the only way to get me hyped about Dawn Trail, because right now the patch story has been, you know, so for me. It's not bad, but it's not gripping either. I'm not like, oh my god, I need the next part to the Final Fantasy XIV saga right now, because Endwalker just ended in such a good place. And that's not, you know, that's actually a testament to how good FF14's writing was. In fact, it's kind of a testament to say that Endwalker may have concluded so hard, it may have went a little too hard on trying to wrap that saga up. Lance the Master, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Are you looking forward to Final Fantasy IX Remake? I feel it's split amongst the fan base because the OG is so charming. I'm looking forward to it if it's real. So I think there is some potential that FF9 Remake could do really, really well, right? Like, so FF9 Remake is going to be timed with the Final Fantasy IX anime, right? So the anime has already been officially confirmed. It's being worked on by a French studio. We've known about this for quite some time. What I find interesting, right, is how much sales have increased on other titles from other game studios as a result of having a popular show, right? So we've seen this with Cyberpunk Edgerunners, explosion in sales. Right now, I'm almost finished with the Fallout live action, which has been amazing. Amazing, by the way. Again, explosion of sales. I think that like all the Fallout games were like ranking on like the top 10 best-selling games for the month that Fallout live action came out. So this is huge. The ability to have a really good selling show that people can access on Netflix, on Prime, or on something like that has consistently done really big numbers, provided that the show is good, right? The Witcher Season 1 did it. Konami is just losing money. Imagine if there was a Castlevania game that you could purchase right now. Castlevania would have blew up too, right? And so it's really just an unfortunate miscalculation there. But I think that FF9 has like this potential to really blow up as a remake if the anime does really well. If the anime doesn't do good, then it's I actually only see it doing like 2 million units. I don't see it outselling like the original. But I think that if FF9 anime is actually a really good anime, and they're kind of aiming it at, they're kind of making it like a kids anime, which does have me somewhat nervous, but I mean, not nervous because I do think FF9 would be perfect for a kids anime, but I do think that like it has to be an Avatar Last Airbender, you know? Which is also like a kids cartoon. But even as a kids cartoon, Avatar The Last Airbender is wrote like, it's wrote like the level of like that you'd expect from an adult series. Mock the Moogle, thank you so much for this super chat. Sending some Moogle magic for FF9 Kupo. Hope you're well, and thank you for your streams. I appreciate that so much, Mock the Moogle. Thank you. You're the best. Crossy, hello. DQ12 is delayed due to internal issues, plus they had their composer Sugiyama pass away only a few years ago, then Toriyama. But we know the 3 HD remake. Yeah, exactly. There's been a lot of death to the core Dragon Quest team with Toriyama and Sugiyama. So I'm sure that is also tremendously impacting Dragon Quest 12, right? Because you also have to think, was Toriyama finished with all of his designs on Dragon Quest 12 before he passed? I don't know, right? Like, it's really hard to say. So I imagine they have some designers that are stepping up to kind of take up the reins for Toriyama. And then who knows whatever they're going to do about music, because I wouldn't imagine, I don't know if Sugiyama's work has been done. Usually music is one of the last things that's kind of done on a game. So it's hard to say. I was hoping you get a 14 Media Tour invite. I didn't imagine me getting a 14 Media Tour invite. Because I don't think I'm hardcore enough. I think if I wanted to, I could have reached out to people and I probably could have gotten invited, but I felt like I wouldn't. I don't know if like I was even going to be able to offer anything good. So, yeah. I probably could have gotten on that if I wanted to, but yeah, I just, yeah. In either case, the biggest issue facing 14 at the moment is making actual long-living quality content. Endwalker's biggest issue from longtime player was most content was dead on arrival or segmented players off into individual instances to grind mindlessly for weeks. The story, even if meh, will be good. It's 14, but yeah, the content is really badly paced right now at 14. Why a lot of people got burned out, including myself. Yeah, that's kind of the issue, right? Is that I think right now with 14, there's a big issue that you mentioned where the hardcore MMO player is at a state of where there's not enough content that they would want to do or that can keep them satisfied, to the point of where they are kind of bored with the game and reaching a point of dissatisfaction. And so I think that, it kind of needs to be addressed more than anything, right? Like, I'm an MSQ Andy. We all know this, and I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not built for the MMO world. However, what I think is like kind of the magic of Final Fantasy 14 has always been that it's a single player RPG and it's an MMORPG, and it does kind of feel like they've compromised the MMO aspect. And I mean, it's still great as a single player RPG, but like for the people who live on the game, I think they need to do a bit more, clearly, because there's too many people that aren't satisfied. King Be Cruel, thank you so much for the super chats. Do you think we'll have a Stranger of Paradise 2? If you asked me this before the cuts were made, before Kiryu really came down on the AA games, I would have said yes, there's definitely going to be a Stranger of Paradise 2, because why not, right? Like, they made a Star Ocean like 6, even though 5 sold terribly. But at this point, I think that there is not going to be. I don't think that Stranger of Paradise 2 is going to be. Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that happening anymore. I think it's probably done. They're focusing more on AAA than AA games, and whether or not the first game was super profitable, I don't know, but it didn't seem to sell massively, so it's hard to say, but I would probably lean toward it not happening right now. At least not for the moment. Not while they are down, right? That being said, it's kind of a shame, because I think they should do another Final Fantasy Souls-like, but I don't think it should be like Stranger of Paradise. But I do think they should do another. I do think that there should be an FF Souls, but I think it should be different than SOT. But I do think that an FF Souls should happen in some capacity. They didn't mention a sales number, but I do know that it was the lowest selling like FF spinoff, like in Japan specifically, not in general, but in Japan it was like one of the lowest selling FF spinoffs. So I don't know how indicative of that is of the rest of the world, but I don't know. What about the Final Fantasy Tactics? Well, first of all, thank you, Corey, for this super chat. What about the Final Fantasy Tactics remake from the NVIDIA leak? Or is there no longer smoke there? Final Fantasy Tactics remake, I am very sure, I'm very certain, is still happening. I feel pretty good on that. However, I think that it's taking time, and I don't know why it's taking time. I think it could be a case that I have a lot of theories on it, but none of it is based in fact. Like objective fact. It's all based on like my headcanons on like what's going on. So I don't want to speak too much on it, and people like kind of run with like me just thinking in my head and take that as like as canon. But it feels like too late to cancel Tactics at this point. It was leaked so long ago, right? Yeah. I don't think they would cancel Tactics anyway, because Tactics just seems like an easy win, right? Like, I think for what FF Tactics is going to cost to make versus like the numbers that it will probably do, I feel like it'll be profitable. Like I can't imagine that thing taking like millions of dollars, you know, to make, and then it like doing nothing in terms of sales. So Cloud Strife First Class, thank you so much for the tier 1, bro. How you doing? What about the World Ends With You series? What happens to that? How do we tell him, chat? How do we tell him? How do we tell him? I'm sorry. I don't think Tweety is coming back, man. Oh, I really don't. I really don't. I think Tweeby is at the end. I think Tweeby is at the end. Um, the FF Tactics remake was almost certainly in development. Where it stands is currently in question. It was the Nvidia leak, and then we got the Tactics Ogre remake, a precursor game. And after its release, Matsuno was on Twitter asking if they were to remake it, players would want broken characters like Sid to remain broken or to be properly balanced. So yeah, it exists. Question is, what's happening now? If I had to take a guess, I would say that they might be reevaluating it. And I'm sure that they're reevaluating the style that they want to do it in. I'm kind of wondering if again, this is me making shit up. This is me hallucinating. So don't take this as fact. This is just me like is pontificating a word and doesn't mean what I think it does. Anyway, this but it was revealed to me in a dream. You know, maybe they probably may have started that out as like an actual remaster, right? They may have started that out as an actual remaster. And then I'm wondering if they're reevaluating like whether they should do it as HD 2D or whether they should change the style of it. Not like the art style necessarily, but like the visual presentation, if that makes sense. And so I'm wondering if that's the cause of the delay with Tactics. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that it was revealed to me in a dream. And yeah, I've been having these weird thoughts lately. I don't know. That's just my guess on like whatever. What would you do if Square requested you remove all your FF videos from your channel? They wouldn't. I benefit them more than not. I think. So do all FF content creators and all Square Enix or guys who make Square Enix content. We ultimately benefit them more than we hurt when we have to be critical about something. So they want us around. They want us around, believe it or not. We do good. We help encourage the fan base to do stuff. I think 7 is one of the Square's most ambitious projects in their entire library, but on the other hand, could they lose their return on investment because the absurdly high development costs? I mean, that's kind of the reality of AAA. And ironically, that reality was created by Final Fantasy VII, right? I mean, that's kind of the irony of the situation surrounding Rebirth, right? Is that Final Fantasy VII is largely considered the first AAA video game. It was considered because it was the most expensive game ever made at the time. King Be Cruel, thank you so much for becoming a member. Appreciate you a ton, man. Welcome. Do you have any hopes for announcements for Summer Games Fest? Right now, I don't know. I don't even think they've been officially announced yet in the first round. Were they announced in round 2? Has round 2 been made public yet? Because I don't think Square or Atlas is going to be there. I'm sure Atlas is going to be there in some way. I think Sega is listed. I think Sega and Atlas are usually separately listed, though. If I recall correctly. It might just all be under Sega if it's Atlas. Atlas is there? Okay. How often do you think we'll come back to Quadratum in KH4? I would hate that if it was only as frequent as we came back to Twilight Town or Traverse Town, right? Well, maybe not Traverse Town. I feel like Traverse Town was like kind of appropriately used. I feel like Twilight Town was used all at the front, and then it was kind of like not used again. I want it to be used more than those two. Did KH3 even have a hub world? I don't even remember, dude. I don't even remember. I haven't touched that game, the base game, in so long, and no, I didn't. Okay. KH fans are gonna be mad when I say this, but I hope to God there's some Final Fantasy characters in this one. I'm sorry, guys. Yes, I'm a boomer. I got into Cage because I saw that Cloud and Sephiroth were in it. And yes, I did. Okay, KH3 did not. Thank you, Potato. Um, like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, I want there to be Final Fantasy characters. Like, that is core to me. That is why I got into the series, dude. And I know you can get Final Fantasy characters to cross over in everything. But dude, there is something like awesome, incredible about Donald Duck and Sephiroth having an interaction. Like, you cannot convince me. You cannot convince me that's not Kino. Like, you can't. I don't care how much y'all gaslight on Twitter. I don't care how much y'all try to say, like, oh, that's not part of like Kingdom Hearts' identity, or that's not why anyone should be in the Kingdom Hearts. Dude, you're wrong. You're wrong, and you should feel wrong. It is. It's awesome, dude. You cannot convince me. You cannot. It's super cool. That's like, I think that like Sora just exploring the Disney worlds is like one level of what makes Kingdom Hearts cool, but then like when like the Final Fantasy characters show up, it gets like another level of ridiculousness that just really sells it to you, right? That just really makes you like, this is so goofy. Like, no pun intended, but like, it's just, it feels like another level of ridiculous, right? I don't know. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that I honestly kind of feel like, um, there's part of me that wonders if like maybe Nomura was kind of dialing back when he said that like, oh, it's not part of like the core concept. But part of me kind of wonders if he was like kind of, you know, feeling things with verses at that time, which is why, you know, Yuzora shows up, because as much as he said that statement where Kingdom Hearts is not a collaboration between, Disney and Final Fantasy. But I'm like, bro, you literally made Kingdom Hearts 3 and 4 an entire commentary, like meta commentary about Final Fantasy versus 13. So how is Final Fantasy not a part of Kingdom Hearts when you made the entire game a commentary about something that happened with Final Fantasy? I know what you're saying, but this is what you are doing and create. Like, you recreated the trailer from Versus. You made the whole thing about Versus, a Final Fantasy game, right? So how is How is this not, you know? Anyway, that's why I always find that argument kind of ridiculous. Because it's so integral to um I mean, how is it not integral to Kingdom Hearts when that commentary even exists in 3, right? There is still a big part of Final Fantasy that's part of um Kingdom Hearts there, which I think, I guess that the reason that people kind of want the separation there is because they feel like, it doesn't allow Kingdom Hearts to be its own thing, which I don't agree with. Kingdom Hearts is still its own thing, whether FF is there or not, it just has its own DNA. I mean, that being said, I still consider Kingdom Hearts to be a Final Fantasy. Okay, let me stop before I get my butt beat on Twitter. I'm gonna get clipped, and they're gonna be like, "Yo, he said Kingdom Hearts is a Final Fantasy. Beat him up." Every Disney World should have one FF character integrated into the story, like Cloud with Olympus in one, and Zack in Birth by Sleep. I mean, it was kind of like that too. Giant Monkey. Also, thank you for the super chat. I deeply appreciate that. They had that in 2, right? Or like FF characters would kind of just appear in Disney Worlds, and I love that. Like when Aaron, like Hades and Aaron, come on, dog. Come on, dog. That was so tight. Are you gonna sit here and tell me that Hades pulling Aaron out of the underworld is not the tightest shit you've ever seen? That's cap. That's cap. That's cap, bro. And you know it's cap. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. And then say, "Oh yeah, dude, it's just as good without the Final Fantasy." Like, no, the fuck, it's not, bro. It's not. It's just not. That shit is tight, and it doesn't even have to be like Final Fantasy characters, right? Like, the Tweeby characters showing up in like Traverse Town and Dream Job Distance was tight. Giant Monkey, thank you so much for the super chat. Barrett for Star Wars World, dude, that would go crazy. That would go crazy. Darth Sephiroth. I don't know. Actually, Sephiroth and Darth Vader dueling. Like, that's what I want. Like, I don't know. I just feel like Kingdom Hearts is at its best when it like leans into its ridiculousness, and I can't think of a better way to lean into that ridiculousness than to also have FF characters there. And it to just literally be that like big like mess, and like I'm saying that in a complimentary way, like a big old just mess where it's like you know just a ton of like crazy ridiculousness, right? Sephiroth versus Vader would be great. Like, and that's the thing, right? Like, let's suppose we have 2 hypothetical worlds. Real life timelines, right? And in one timeline, we get Sephiroth versus Vader, and in the other timeline, we get a Cage 4 without Sephiroth versus Vader. And I'm not saying that has to happen. I'm just saying that, like, if it hypothetically did, the one where we got it would be better than the one where we didn't. Similarly, it's always going to be better when there's just random FF characters just showing up in Cage. It is. I think it's cool. Subtext also, what's up, bro? How you doing? What if they have young Sephiroth from Ever Crisis? That would be incredible. That would be incredible. But yeah, I just think it's really cool whatever the characters are able to interact, and yeah. Now that Disney owns Marvel, imagine we get Marvel characters in Cage. I don't think that's off the table either, and I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be really cool. So Kingdom Hearts 4 is kind of like their next big game, like their next like major seller. That's definitely coming before. It's definitely coming before Dragon Quest 12. Dragon Quest 12 is going to be quite a great deal off. Dragon Quest 12 will probably be their next big game after KH4, but I don't even know when KH4 is coming, right? Because I don't know if we have good indication that KH4 is like necessarily coming anytime soon. I would imagine that KH4 is a 2026 game. KH4 is next year. KH4 is next year in the sense of that's when I think we're going to really see it again in a big way. I do think it's not impossible though for us to get a trailer for it like now, right? Because with Kingdom Hearts 3, we did get like a lot of early trailers for it, and those early trailers didn't like really reflect necessarily how the final game was in terms of visual aesthetics or anything like that, but we did get a lot of updates on it to kind of show that it was still progressing. So I don't think it would be too insane for us to get like a KH4 trailer sometime maybe this year that kind of shows a bit of an update, but isn't quite anywhere near the final game. So crazy to think we are halfway through the PS5/Xbox Series gen. Yeah, I know. And like, I don't feel like we have really tremendously much to show for it. I feel like this generation has just been like a extension of the last generation. I don't think that's necessarily bad in a lot of ways. But I don't feel like we've really taken a leap. And I feel like we've mostly just, you know, kind of just extended that generation. I mean, we don't really have a terrible number. I mean, we're just now really starting to get current generation exclusives, it feels like. Because a lot of the big titles have been cross-gen. Um, so I don't know. I don't know. I actually feel like PlayStation 6 should be a hybrid console. This is where I'm going to get my butt beat again. But I actually feel like I feel the tech just isn't there to keep. Not that the tech isn't there actually, because we can always keep making better GPUs. But I think the problem is that we can't keep making graphics that take advantage of those GPUs in like a profound way, not without bankrupting companies and costing even more money. And games are already so expensive, and so unless we have something that profoundly changes that, I don't really see that happen. Is it KH9? How do you pronounce it? But thank you again for $5 donation. KYH9 says, I think there's an issue that there's not big enough technical jump between PS4 and 5. Even the PS6 will be more of the same at this point. It's why Switch 2 being as strong as a PS4 is basically them narrowing the gap to marginal levels. Right. I agree so much, man. And so the best looking video game, I think, out right now, like, I think that no game has come even close to it this entire generation. We talked about this before, and I'll bring it up again. It is Horizon Forbidden West. I don't think anything comes close to Horizon Forbidden West. It's just the best looking game. Period. And it runs on PS4. A base PS4. A base PS4, not even a Pro. It can run on the standard one from like 2013. Yeah, Ragnarok is also on PS4. How many games offhand can you name that look better than Ragnarok or Forbidden West? You can't name that many. At the most, you can name games that are on par with them. PS5 is just PS4K, right? But here's the thing though too, right? Is that like, and it's not like, developers aren't pushing it hard enough or whatever. The reality just is that making a game that, like, budget wise, that could even take advantage of it is so ridiculous. Like what it would require, right? And then what's going to happen when PlayStation 6 comes out? I think the biggest jump with PS5 really has just been performance, right? So, 60 frames per second more often than not. Not always the best 60 FPS modes, but it's more common now. And then I think the other benefit has been the SSD, which very much, I don't mean to downplay the SSD one bit. I do think the SSD has been the biggest revolution for this gen. And so while we're not really pushing in terms of graphics anything too crazy, I do think that we are pushing a lot of things in terms of loading data so much faster. And I do think that that's opening up a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that developers couldn't do on the past generation. But in terms of visuals, right? Like outside of what the SSD can do, like are visuals really a leap? No. I think load times have been the biggest leap of this generation, which I don't think is worth downplaying at all, as I do think that like minimizing load times and straight up getting rid of them altogether has been a tremendous leap in its own right. But I don't think that we're really going too crazy with graphics anymore. I think we're just getting marginally better. And I don't think that, I mean, what could we do to make graphics better at this point other than spending millions of more dollars on a game, which would then hundreds of millions of dollars more, and which would then make the game higher risk, which would then make the game have to be even more mainstream and safe, right? It just gets ridiculous at some point, and at some point we got to say enough, right? Until, something comes out that can make these graphics cost less, then I don't really see a way of pursuing AAA even more and more and more. We were having these conversations, by the way, back during the PS3 era. When games are like a fraction of the cost that they are now, we were having this conversation, and we were like, at some point it has to stop. And game costs have ballooned even more since then, and that's not just inflation either. It's also the fact that they just cost more to make, even more. And so, at some point we're just kind of like, what do you do, right? Like where does it end? And so development costs are going to go up even more. And yeah. And I think one thing that really blackpills me on the whole situation is that it takes 5 to 7 years to develop a game now, right? A modern AAA game. Because it takes 5 to 7 years, that means that if you don't start a game before the PS5 comes out, that game has to be a PS6 game. Do you realize the consequence of that? That means that every PS5 game has to start development before the PS5 comes out. That means that, like, we cannot have a game start development in the middle of the PS5's life. It would be exceedingly rare or difficult to actually get that game out. So that means that when PS5 launched, almost all the games for it that would ever come out were already pretty much greenlit. All the AAA games, that is. Think about that for a second. That sucks. That sucks, right? I think this is why people look back on like the PS1 and PS2 era games so fondly. And even beyond like, you know, all the other stuff that happened because they weren't AAA in the modern sense. And they were a lot cheaper to produce and all this other stuff. I also think too that they just came out faster. They were lower risk. They were able to just make stuff and just put it out. Right? And it didn't take an entire generation to create a game. Give me an FF game with pre-rendered backgrounds. That's what I'm saying, man. I love PS1 nostalgia. And you know, I don't know if video games have really been made better as a result of it. Right? Like I don't know if that has really in a deep, profound way made video games tremendously better. I don't know if I can say. Oh, I'm sorry. KYH9, I just saw your do I still have alerts off? Let me turn those back on. I just saw your donation. Thank you so much. KYH9 says, I think Nintendo is ironically in a position to keep dev costs down, increasing visuals, because if they're using NVIDIA hardware, that means they have access to the Turing cores that can run upscaling AI models that could be used for assets someday. Yeah. So that's kind of the thing I predict, that it's tough to say like the role of AI in the future of video games right now. I definitely think that you're onto something too with this. I think you're dead on with this. But on that note too, I imagine that AI will play some type of role in AAA game development. I'm kind of concerned on what that role will be though. So I mean, I don't want AI to take jobs. I think that's like the big thing, right? I think that inevitably it's probably going to take some. I just don't want every game to be AI generated garbage. You know what I'm saying? I want there to be an appropriate, if it's going to be used, which I'd rather it not, but if it's going to be used, I'd rather there be some type of ethical limits drawn in places about how it can be used and where, right? That makes sense and that everyone can agree on is an ethical way of using AI. But the issue just becomes two things, right? The sourcing of the models, the AI models themselves, and making sure that they're actually legal and ethical and not stealing from artists. And then the other issue becomes, is it just eliminating jobs to create AI generated garbage that feels unoriginal and derivative? So there's a lot of ethical concerns there. I think it was like Alana Pierce who mentioned it and said that like some company did an experiment where they tried to create a purely AI generated game just for proof of concept to see if it could be done. And the results basically were that with current AI technology, you cannot create an AI generated game. There's been, people trying to create AI generated assets, video game assets, and currently it can't really do that. I think every time, something like Power World pops up, or people are like, did AI generate some of this? And then it's like, no, current AI technology is not capable of doing that. So humans can be just as lazy as AI. They can be. I mean, again, some of the most uninspired derivative stuff has also come from human beings and not even from AI, right? So there's also that as well. But yeah, that's one way AAA could manage the cost and dev times, but it's so uncertain, and there are so many ethical concerns that I would not jump on the bandwagon and be like AI is like the solution to our problems. Whereas I think that being more manageable about games with realistic expectations and doing things more practically is probably the right way to create games and not just, AI blast it. What's interesting about those dev cycles? Back in the day, Ocarina of Time was infamous for its long development cycle of 4 or 5 years. Then leading into Skyward Sword, it was the same. Now every game is like that, but not every game delivers the experience that a new Zelda guarantees a player. Yeah, I know not everyone loves the games, but they are always quality regardless of person. Yeah, exactly, right? Like it's actually crazy to think that Ocarina of Time, like coming out, was like, 4 to 5 years was like unheard of, right? And I remember, like watching like, YouTube documentaries and stuff and YouTube videos on Nintendo games. We all did growing up, and watching Ocarina of Time videos, and it was nuts, right? I think it's like, whoa, they spent 4 to 5 years creating this game. That's so much time. And then just to find out that now every game, Claire I, hello, how you doing? What do you mean don't throw AI at everything? Yeah, I know, it's crazy. AI cannot just automatically solve every problem. I know that's crazy for some for some to hear. I do think that if there is a way to ethically source the models and to implement AI in sensible ways that doesn't, essentially eliminate the workforce to create a bunch of garbage really fast, then I think it can be applied in some ways to help speed up the development of AAA games. But the way some people think, where we're just gonna prompt a whole game into existence, or prompt character models, like whole character models into existence without any type of human touch-ups or corrections or anything like that. Not only do I think that's not going to happen, I think that would be kind of a shitty reality if it did. I don't think that... thing is, AI is already used in... AI is already used in software development, period. Right? Like if you're a software developer of any type, you probably already use like GitHub Copilot, right? You already use various AIs in order to help you code stuff faster. That stuff is already being used. Like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they talked about AI generated lip sync, which I think everyone was on the same page about that's a very appropriate use of AI, right? To lip sync faster, right? Because, I don't want a talented creative to spend 1,000 hours lip syncing. I just don't think that's like what the creative, like a talented individual that should be being paid, a good wage for their work. I don't think that's a great utilization of them, right? So I think that's an appropriate use, because it sends that creative back to being able to do their highest level of work, right? So I think if we're going to talk about ethical usages of AI, like that's what it should be for. Is dumb redundant work should be like eliminated by the AI, right? And the high level work, the work that makes creatives the human element, where we actually need a very intelligent something with a soul making stuff. That's where a person is needed, right? So if you can get rid of redundant work like lip sync and replace that with an AI, that's great. But I don't want an AI drawing the character. That's stupid. That's dumb. That's not what an AI should be doing. A human being should be drawing the character. Now, if you could give the human being like AI tools to be able to draw the character faster or something like that, but they're still the one actually creating it, things like that, that's fine too. But it should be about making the jobs of human beings easier and not trying to ultimately replace as many human beings as possible. However, corporate greed, and that there's some dude sitting in an office and all he knows is that Stable Diffusion can generate characters, and so his position will be, oh well, I can just replace all these guys, right? But Stable Diffusion is never going to generate Cloud Strife, right? It's never going to make that next big lovable character. I think only people can really do that. I just made an API website authentication today. 0 experience with C#, Java or CSS. Copilot. Yeah, Copilot's pretty good. It'll help you do all that stuff, right? And it allows that's why AI copilots are so big for developers, is because there's a lot of redundant code that you have to create, right? And so that AI allows them to do the redundancies a lot faster and get to the actual creative high level work that they're supposed to be doing that actually makes them valuable, right? How do you feel about AI upscaling old pre-rendered backgrounds? I think AI upscaling is a perfectly ethical use of AI. I don't think anyone really disagrees with AI upscaling being like a bad thing, because you're not generating a new image, you're just making the old image high resolution. So I don't think anyone is against that use of AI. That's a perfectly ethical use. But that's kind of the thing too, is that it also has like this. There are some people who kind of cringe at the word, because they only have the negative association with the term, and they don't realize that the technology itself is neither really good nor bad. It's just how we decide to use it as people. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like they don't have like reasons to it's not like they don't have reasons to kind of like, because there is so many like harmful AI things, but there's also good AI things, right? So it's tough. We're gonna have to it's gonna be one of those things where people are going to have to sort out what's a good application of it, what's an ethical application of it, what's an ethical use for it. Most AI is machine learning. AI is just a buzzword slapped to a lot of and we've been using machine learning for like over a decade plus. We've been using way longer probably even, and sometimes AI upscale looks worse than the original, right? The thing is that AI upscaling, even then, a human being still has to usually tweak it in order for it to look right. And I use AI upscaling myself, but for like thumbnails and stuff to make them crisp. But even still, I typically have to do a bit of photoshopping to make it look right, because sometimes when images get compressed or downsized, they also get slightly distorted, and the AI doesn't know what it's really looking at in terms of that distortion, and so sometimes it will redraw very strange things and make them kind of weird. And so it's just I'm tired of people, the little people, the grunts, the customers, etc., saying, we get the company needs to make money. Yeah, it does. We know that, but the best way they can make millions per year is get rid of the soulless units that drain companies dry and care little for the product. They are there to skim the fat and make the number go up with no concern for the long term. The executive suites and corporate culture are killing it. It's kind of the reality of publicly traded companies though too, right? Is that you have to make more money. You have to be growing. And if you're not growing, it sucks. I think we talked about this. Like, was it this? It was like 2 streams ago, maybe, or maybe it was last stream where I was like, if you made $1 billion this year and you made like, $1 billion next year, then it's kind of like, well, you zero growth. Even if you're making $1 billion a year, there's no growth, and so yikes, time to sell, right? But I mean, and that's what you have to do, right? Because if you invested money in it, why wouldn't you? Because I mean, the money's not going up or down or anything like that. So yeah. Um, AI should be used to make every cutscene text dubbed in Octopath. Um, when the voices just stop reading so many texts makes me sleepy. That one's a slippery slope with like AI reading or AI voice acting. I don't know, because there's definitely people stealing voices. I don't think it's a big deal if you have consenting people who are willing to lend their voice for certain for like voice acting for AI, like if they're willing to be paid for it. But then I also think too that you create kind of a situation where for a lot of people they become more interested than in creating higher quality AI voices so that they could just not pay any real voice actors, right? Even if the quality from a real voice actor is better, they just see that the number is lower. However, I do agree that like from an accessibility standpoint, I do think it would be great if I mean, because like we have like screen readers and stuff like that. So I do think that from an accessibility standpoint, if we could have like natural screen readers and stuff like that, that would be awesome. Or like in games that like you could have like text dialogue be read to you and stuff like that. Like there is a huge benefit there. I don't know. I don't know, right? Like I think like a question that's like kind of proposed to you in like engineering classes, like 'cause you have to take ethics classes when you take any type of engineering course in like college. Like one of the examples that was typically kind of used was, if you're making like a self-driving car, and the self-driving car has to either hit a child or hit like a group of like old people or something like that. Like, what do you program the self-driving car to do? It's a very morbid question, right? But in that instance, you have to play God, right? You have to like decide like which one of those things is like more appropriate or less ethical or not, right? And that is kind of like the slippery slope of a lot of AI usage, especially with like with AI voice acting. Maybe not to the extreme of being hit by a car, but you understand what I mean. So, yeah. Just like every sci-fi movie ever, just because we can doesn't mean we should. I mean, yeah, and DLSS is AI. So, no one will tell you that DLSS is like unethical or whatever. So, um, that's like one way in which AAA might be more manageable, but I don't want that to be, necessarily what we do to like for sure uh you know make video games aggressively more AAA. 'Cause I don't think that that's necessarily the solution. I think that actually making more AA, more smaller scale games that are shorter, games that are made by less people, I kind of think that that's probably the better way to approach things than um, just seeing how much AI we can cram into something to to reduce costs. Like I don't know if that's like necessarily what we need to do. I don't think that that's because again, there's just so many issues there. And also too, like I think it's better when people make games. And I want people to make games. And I want human beings to make them. So I think that's what's important. We got super derailed on this topic. But not necessarily what we were talking about. However, that on that note though, that does make me think about like Final Fantasy 17, right? Kind of, because I imagine FF17 would have to already be in development somewhere, right? Because if FF17 isn't in development, that means FF17 is not coming until next gen. Which actually kind of sucks. But I kind of think that FF17 isn't coming until next gen, now that I think about it. I imagine, yeah, pre-production, that's what I imagine too. Do you think a game should cost $70 if it's 10 hours long? I think it's fine. Like Resident Evil and Devil May Cry are like that, but those games have high replayability and you can get a lot more than 10 hours, but usually their campaigns are about that long. But I think it'd be cool if we had games that were like $50 and under 20 hours, or 20 hours or roughly 20 hours too. So I think that'd be great. Who would even helm FF17? CPU 1's busy with 7. CPU 3 is moving on to other projects. That's the problem. That's the problem. Who would helm Final Fantasy 17? I would have imagined like the way Yoshi P was speaking, like a brand new team, but like CS2? Yeah, that's right. They're creative studios now. But I mean, that would be like Team Asano, right? Like Team Asano doing Final Fantasy 17. I don't think that would be terrible at all. I reckon Final Fantasy 17 will be the first mainline to drop the number. I don't think that's impossible. I don't. I think they'll do something like Resident Evil, where it'll be called like Village or something, and then like in between like the letters, they'll be like you'll see like the 17 in the subtitle, right? That I mean that's a very probable way that they could do things. Those are the people that made Octopath, right? Yeah, those are the people that made Octopath, and Bravely Default, and that's CS2, Creative Studio 2. Is there a word that uses 17? No, but I mean they could use like a uh I don't know actually. That 17 would be a tricky one. Actually, I don't know how they would do that. I can't see Asano moving on to mainline. It's a massive jump into their history because, well, I mean, yeah, it would be a massive jump, right? FF3 and 4 DS remakes, for Heroes of Light, Bravely, Octopath, and remaking games in HD 2D. Jumping from games like that to the big FF game, that's a lot. Okay, so I mean, yeah, that is a lot. That is a lot. I mean, it was kind of a lot for CPU 3, right? I'm still gonna call them CPUs because it's just it's too stuck in my my vernacular to call them anything else. But I mean, yeah, it was also kind of a jump for CPU3 because they were used to making MMOs and they never made anything that was like a current gen title. So I don't think that's impossible for, Asano to do mainline. And remember that Asano was also promoted alongside Hamaguchi recently. So Asano is pretty big stuff in Square Enix, and I do kind of think that Asano, in terms of the core Final Fantasy audience, is a good idea. Because I do think he would make something that would appeal to the core FF audience. I think they have a problem that is very difficult for them to solve right now, because the issue has been that they want to pursue a new, wider audience, right? At the same time, they're making choices in pursuing that newer, wider audience that also alienates and angers kind of their existing audience, right? So, take something like Final Fantasy 16, for example. Like Final Fantasy 16, not to say that there wasn't, I mean, clearly there are existing FF fans, plenty of existing FF fans that were, quite satisfied with that game, but there were also ones that weren't, right? There were also ones that felt like the move to a more hack and slash system, something that didn't have party members, etc. There were a lot of them that were just like, nope. And so it feels like they're making decisions to try to gain that new audience, but then they're also not gaining enough new audience at the same time to replace the old heads, if that makes sense, right? So let's take like Zelda, for example, right? There's a lot of people who don't really like the Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom formula, right? However, and as brutal as this sounds, it kind of doesn't matter what they think, because there's enough people who do. There's enough newcomers who do. And the newcomers that do strongly outweigh the people who demand the old style of Zelda. And so the next Zelda is probably going to be open air as well. I mean, they've already confirmed it. And so it doesn't alienate enough old Zelda heads. And the old Zelda heads who are still mad about it, again, there's just not enough of them for it to significantly impact the direction of Zelda. And so Final Fantasy is not quite really in that situation, unfortunately, where it does not feel like it doesn't feel like there's enough old heads who have been really into what they're doing, but then also to it doesn't feel like they're attracting enough new people simultaneously to kind of justify it. So everyone in this chat likely knows someone whose first Zelda was Breath of the Wild. Yes. So it's tough, right? I do think that, like, again, I do think that Re-Trilogy's combat is something that I think could potentially be the thing that is like the medium that satisfies both, but I don't think that the package that something like Rebirth is in, and that is, and we mentioned this before, being the sequel to a remake sequel, right? Which makes it really tough for new people to just dive in to. And so, if you look at 16 and you're looking at Rebirth, then essentially what it feels like you have a Final Fantasy that is really trying to target newcomers hard, and the other one, on the other hand, is kind of a bit too into the core audience and doesn't really allow access, or is not as readily accessible to everybody as it could be, or as it, I mean, honestly should be. And so I think Final Fantasy 17 is kind of the opportunity to make something that's a bit more middle ground, right? Ironically, Final Fantasy 15 having that mission statement of, for fans and first timers alike, I don't know if it necessarily achieved that. I think you can make an argument either way, but I think it achieved it in the sense of the sales for sure, because if you look at the numbers, it definitely hit that. Whether it achieved that into a game design sense, that's what I meant before. I think that there's room for debate, but in terms of appeal, it seems that 15 did hit that. And so I do think that they need to create something with 17 that allows it to be between, the kind of extremes that 16 and Rebirth kind of laid out. Because I think that it's really difficult to, because I can't say like, oh, your first Final Fantasy game ever should be Rebirth. It's really difficult for me to say that. It's easier for me to say that about 16 for sure. But then I also feel like too that, like, when I talk about kind of the core experience of, oh, actually that'll get me in trouble. Never mind. I'm gonna end this. They won't like it if I finish that sentence. You have modern FF, that's it. There's different flavors of it, but it's all FF. You play it, you like it. There's zero you should see disparage, that what you don't. Yeah, I mean, I do think that FF, and I've been saying this for a while, I do think that there has to be some sort of consistency, right? Like, I think that is the definitive difference between what people call the golden era and what people call the modern era, right? Like, I think that it's really hard to run a brand when the brand is just literally anything. And don't get me wrong, it's an anthology series, and so it's different every time. But like, the thing is that traditional Final Fantasy did have a thing underlying that united all of them, and now there isn't that thing, and so it gets really difficult to kind of like say like what the brand or the series really is. And so I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think that you can have something that underpins the entire series, unites it in a way, just like FF has had from the start. And I think that you can also explore various different themes, locations, settings, characters, growth systems, and things like that. And again, that's something that FF has had from the start. And so, and I think that it's only recently kind of not done that. And so, I think if they found out that sort of thing that they could do and have that consistency and continue to make a certain type of game to the best of their ability, that it would do really well and it would serve them in a tremendous way. I think a great example of that would be like FromSoft, and how FromSoft has continuously built on the Soulsborne genre, right? In a way, if you wanted to like view that as a series like Final Fantasy, where it was an anthology, you even could, right? And there's actually more in common between each Soulsborne IP from FromSoft than there is from two different FFs at this point, right? So, I don't disagree that there should be some consistency. I'm a Dragon Quest fan. I like consistency, but mute point is people saying X or Y is not FF because of their own biases is dumb as much as people may like it or not. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. FF is always whatever the devs, whatever the hell the devs say it's going to be. And I don't disagree there. Like, some people will say, oh, 13's not FF, 16's not FF. They're all FF. 11, 14, it's all FF, right? I guess my argument would just be that while that's all cool and while that's all contributed to franchise identity, I do think that going forward and looking back simultaneously, whichever way you look, there does need to be some type of consistency and binding elements that FF is about that allows it to say this is Final Fantasy, right? And not be just whatever, right? That's what I think on that. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring have more in common than FF15, FF16, and FF7 are. That's kind of my point, right? Like you kind of like you know what you're getting, right? Like, and not in like a bad or predictable way necessarily. I don't think after Elden Ring anyone is saying like, "Oh my god, I'm so tired of Soulsborne," right? Because they do enough each time. They put it in like a different enough type of setting where it's interesting, right? And even then, like, you have stuff like Sekiro that comes out, and that's also interesting, just due to the setting and aesthetic changes that make it really fascinating. So, and each one is continuing to sell more and more each time. So, I agree, but FF fans generally are dumb and don't say that. They present an actual argument and saying herder, not an FF. That's just stupid. There's more nuance to that debate. FF fans are ironically, though, never bother reading beyond a surface level and engage with nuance. The irony is most of the stories in the franchise rely on people reading between the lines. Yeah, I know. You're not wrong at all, Crossy. I agree. But I mean, yeah. I mean that's just the thing. I think that they need to have a system, like systems in play that are definitively Final Fantasy, and then play with those systems each time, like just like they used to do. And I think that's what makes FF really interesting. And I do think they should continue to play with settings and characters and those sorts of things each time, and create new worlds and all that other stuff. But I do think that there needs to be like a level of consistency each time, right? Like with Final Fantasy like 1 through 10, I think you could describe a type of game that FF 1 through 10 is. Honestly, not even just FF 1 through 10. I think that even like 12 and 13 really extend to this as well. 13 to a lesser extent, but honestly, even those two games, I feel like there's like, to a degree, yeah, I wouldn't really exclude 12 now that I think about it in particular, because 12 really does, especially after the Zodiac job system. Outside of the active dimension combat, like 12 still pretty much has like the Final Fantasy stuff that you'd expect, right? It may not do it like in the way you like, But if you really think about it, it still does have most of the core underpinnings that you would probably call like Final Fantasy. Yeah, 1 through 9 is the most consistent, but um, I don't feel like 10 and 12 necessarily change so much in like a way that like they like create something that's like unidentifiable necessarily. Again, because I think when you get into 12's combat, it's still ATB, right? You're just kind of like walking around, and it's kind of automated by like the gambit system, but it's not right. Like 13 is kind of like where it started to like where people kind of felt like it was tipping the other way. But even with 13, you still had like an ATB system and the party members. It was overly streamlined, and it was kind of too simple. It was a little too simple. And the combat has depth, don't get me wrong. In some ways, it has more depth than the old systems, the old ATV systems. But I feel like the actual meta RPG of 13 was too simple for most people. And that's kind of like where it draws a lot of heat, like the growth systems and the exploration and level design. That type of stuff was just so overly streamlined to the point of where it kind of nerfed the game, because I actually think the combat in 13 can be quite enjoyable, especially on boss fights. But yeah, the actual meta RPG, like the RPG outside of combat that's happening is really the contention that most people have with 13. 13 does have great boss fights, I agree. Like actually 13 trilogy in general, the boss fights are like some of the best in the franchise, really. But it's just unfortunate that the game outside of combat in 13 is like what's so lacking. And that's why that game, tends to get a lot of flack. 13.2 really fixed that, because 13.2, there's actually quite a lot of game that happens outside of combat. There's a lot of like exploration and fooling around with stuff, and little puzzles and stuff you can do, and there's a lot of fun and nice pace changes that happen with 13.2. And 13.2 is kind of paced better as a game in general. So, I have a lot of criticism of 13, but I don't think it's like, it's not the L that like a lot of 13 haters make it out to be. But it is not like the godsend that I think a lot of people have tried to make it lately. But I don't think everything about it is bad for sure. It just made like a lot of decisions that really hurt the experience. And it's funny too, because you can look back at 13 and you can see that they really had something there. They just made a ton of decisions that were just so puzzling around the game design and the storytelling. And it's just like, this actually could have been pretty good if they just chose a few of these things better than what they decided to do, right? Like a lot of it is just simple stuff, like, you can't switch a party member like mid-battle, right? Like just small stuff like that, where I'm like, that would have helped so much. Or like locking off all of the battle system really into like chapter 9 out of 13, brother. Like just letting me have, all the features of the battle system faster would have tremendously helped that game. Or forcing me to play as certain characters without being able to switch characters, and all that kind of stuff. If it was just, or a lot of the level design where it was very very, very, very linear. And I don't think linear is necessarily a bad word, but I think it can be bad when there's no pace breaks, there's no type of like engagement or anything like that in the world to do outside of fight battles. Just stuff like that, just small stuff. And all that small stuff kind of added up on the game. And so Again, like if you look at the combat of that game, like the aesthetic designs, the music, some of the concepts, they're all really cool. It's just, yeah. I think that's what pisses me off about the first 13 the most. Is just that it could have been a great game if they just made like a couple of things, just like a couple of choices differently. It could have actually been, you know, like really, really, really good in a non-divisive way, not in like a non like you either love it or hate it way. Like you can tolerate these things or you cannot. Yeah, it's so puzzling because a lot of stuff would not have taken that much additional work for them to have implemented, right? But it's just like they made certain decisions with that game, and I don't know. I don't know why they made them. They reversed a lot of them in 13.2, and that's why you see me praise 13.2 so much, because 13.2 is what I think 13.1 should have been game design wise. But they just didn't, right? And so 13.2, they kind of reflected on that, and they were like, oh yeah, why did we do that? Why did we lock out the entire battle system for like more than half of the game? You know, why did we you know, lock character roles for so long? Not make it so that you can switch party members. Stuff like that. Like it's like, oh yeah, we can still have like, these levels, and like there can actually be parts of it that you can unlock, and you can explore different aspects, and some areas have larger zones in them, and some areas are more linear, and there's like a mix of different types of like levels that you go through, and there's like the little puzzles that you do, and we have a villain that's like an actual guy, and like and not like a robot god thing. And the villain has like, relatable, comprehensible motivations that aren't just like weird god stuff, like I want to restart the cycle. And so I think 13.2 like really got it right. And generally speaking, I feel like if 13.1 had all the stuff 13.2 had, 13 would not have been a divisive game at all. I think that people would have really accepted that as just like what the new Final Fantasy was, and people wouldn't have pushed back on it as much. I think some people still would have had like a lot of contentions with some story stuff, whatever, right? But I do think that people would have been okay with it as a game a lot more than kind of like how it came out, which ended up being so divisive. And then yeah, the kind of like lore dump between like the Fal'Cie and the l'Cie, and I think that 16 did a lot better job at like actually choosing its terminology. Like I feel like it's very intuitive, like dominant icon, stuff like that, which is actually kind of a lot of the same concepts as like a l'Cie or a Fal'Cie, right? However, it's just like the terminology is a lot more accessible and easy to understand, right? Like I can understand that the icon is like the big moving thing, and the dominant is the guy that's controlling the big moving thing, is the thing that transforms into it, right? And the bearer bears magic. Yeah, so I think that 16, yeah, 16 is very simple. That's why the nomenclature works. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, it uses a lot more straightforward. And I think that 13 drew a lot of criticism from using like very non-straightforward, right? Like trying to like, tell someone like l'Cie, Fal'Cie. I think that's why it drew that kind of criticism, right? Because a lot of people at the time were like, well, all Final Fantasies use that kind of terminology, but actually most Final Fantasies were actually pretty straightforward with their terminology, right? Like if you really think about it, like like materia is like the balls that you find, right? That's pretty easy to remember. Materia, materials. It's already a word, really. Yeah. So yeah, materia. That's easy. Life stream. It's the stream of life. um, junction. I mean, yeah, you junction the magic out, right? And so I think that like even though previous FFs were like, could be heavy on terminology or whatever, like the terminology was pretty straightforward, right? Faith, right? Fireflies. I think like all those terms like really make sense. Like if you think about it, they're not like they're kind of describing a thing, right? Even things like soldier. Yeah, like soldier. Yeah. It's spelled in all caps, but you know what soldier is, right? Like it's not like 10 was an esoteric story told very well. 13 was, yeah, I mean, that's actually very well put, John. That's extremely well put. Yeah. I think that the terminology was really straightforward. Whereas like fallacy, cocoon, pulse, lessee, I don't think those terms were like the terms weren't intuitive. I mean, yeah, like Magitech, right? Magic technology. Sin, right? Like, yeah, like whereas like if you had to ask me why Sin was named Sin, I'd be able to tell you. But if you had to ask me why Orphan's named Orphan, I'd have to go peek at the Wikipedia article. Like, Orphan. Because I wouldn't readily like know that offhand. And I played 13 like 3 times. So I wouldn't even, I guess because it was orphaned by the gods or whatever. It was very nonsensical. Yeah, it's whatever. I mean, and when I say nonsensical, it's not that you can't make sense of it, right? If you go listen to his villain monologue and you go look up the FNC, you can get it. It's just like the story kind of doesn't really present you that good reason to care about that stuff in that way. Like it's really hard to care because at the end we're kind of fighting against Orphan to kind of defend the world and change everyone's fates, but at the same time too we don't really, I don't know, I didn't really have like the same sort of like strong reasons that we had like with 10, for example, right? Where it's about saving Yuna, which was a point that was really driven home in a good way throughout the course of the story. Or saving Spira, right? Where every place that we went to was ravaged by sin. And we kind of saw that throughout. And we like genuinely felt those stakes. Whereas I feel like in a lot of 13, we went through this entire world that really hates us. Never really had a profound moment, I think, where we were kind of like, oh man, we really do need to save Cocoon. Pulse. It never really got to that point where I had a profound reason to save Cocoon other than the characters were from Cocoon. And yeah, you never really get driven into kind of the people inhabiting it and having this sense of protection or wanting to protect them. In fact, it really just felt like, why do I want to save these people that were mean? Even then, I think it would have been interesting to really drive the story home about that, because that's also an interesting idea, right? But then they should have leaned into that, I feel like. Granted, 10's plot is also confusing. I don't think 10's plot's confusing at all. I think 10 has an incredibly straightforward plot. Personally, I think it does. Well, that's how did Tidus come back to life? Well, that's 10-2. That's 10-2. And also too, like, 10 had like had a kind of terrible change that happened in its development where Tidus was originally supposed to be dead, and then they changed him to a dream of the faith. And I'm gonna be honest, the idea that Tidus was from James Zanarkand, or he was from Zanarkand, and he's a dream of or that he was like, or that he died, I guess, was a better plot line. They changed it because of the Sixth Sense, by the way. That's the reason. They felt the plot twist was too similar to the Sixth Sense, so they changed it. And it's the weakest part of the whole story because they changed it. And it's something that in your head you can still change back and view the whole story through that lens. And 10 actually makes more sense and is better from viewing that. 10 gets really stupid when it comes to Tidus, but the game itself is fine. Literally just, yeah, that twist in particular is silly to me. However, I think that the Dream of the Faith is not entirely silly because basically, you know, I guess it makes Tidus like similar to the Aeons, right? Which are also kind of dreams of the faith. So essentially, Tidus then becomes an Aeon, and then there's the connection between Yuna and the Aeons, and that's what that's supposed to be, I guess. 10 goes immediately downhill like once you start going outside of 10 story. But that could probably be said about every Final Fantasy, really. It's that like a lot of the external stuff is never going to be as good as the source material. Um so future Zanarkand was never a thing. Um there's Dream Zanarkand, and then there's the original Zanarkand. So there's the Dream of Zanarkand that's on top of Sin, and then there's the actual Zanarkand that you go to at the end. Yeah, I think that 10 is actually like one of the most straightforward FFs. I think that the twist can be kind of wild, but I don't think that it's that difficult to wrap my head around. But also, too, I think that to the benefit of these older Final Fantasies, even when they were kind of a little bit difficult to wrap your head around, I do think that everything that was needed was still in the game, right? I think that if you play Final Fantasy X, you know, like if you play that game once, I think you'll get it. And I think if you play it twice or 3 times, you'll profoundly understand it. Like especially on that third playthrough, you'll be like, I completely get the entire vision now. But I think you'll probably get that even on the second. And so from that sense, or in that sense, to me, it's a pretty well written story. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about Dreams Anakin being on top of Sid and Lifty. I don't know. I don't know every bit of. We need Dangzo 8 in here. He would know. Would you say that FF9 is convoluted? Not really. I don't think so. I think that 7 can border on convoluted. But I also think the convoluted parts of 7 are not too necessary to like really understand and like it. But at the same time though too, I feel like I would have expected the re-trilogy to make 7 a lot more straightforward, I guess, or a lot less. That's not the word I'm looking for. I guess what I'm trying to describe is I thought that Retrilogy would not try to double down on trying to make 7 convoluted, or try to make it a little bit more explicit in the areas where people were a little confused by. But then I think it's come up with a ton of new stuff that is a lot more convoluted than anything in the original game. And so it's just really hard to comment on whether that is a good thing or not until we have the third part, because until we do have the third part, we can't really definitively say if that paid off or not. So I actually don't know if that's like a good thing. I guess you're well versed in all things FF and OGFO7 Black Materia. When the Black Materia becomes an actual materia, does Cloud physically start? Oh, that's a ask Baby Seal that one. He'll give you a better answer. And he'll give you a much more in-depth answer. Yeah, I don't mind necessarily convoluted stories or esoteric stories. I guess with Retrilogy though, I guess my biggest problem with it has just been that I feel like Retrilogy should have definitely doubled down on allowing newcomers more than anyone else to really get Final Fantasy VII as it was, rather than layering these new mysteries on so heavy, right? Such that it can potentially alienate people who are trying to get into it. Because I really feel like telling someone that it's a remake sequel and you need to play the original first, and then you need some familiarity with the compilation, and then 25 years with the stories are coming together here, and this is all being it does get like, and I mean, like, I think that Final Fantasy VII in particular was just the right amount of maybe necessary convolution before it became a bit too hard to get into, or a bit too hard for many people to grasp. And so I think layering on dream worlds or timelines, or however you want to describe whatever is going on in the 7 trilogy, that it then creates this situation where it becomes this really difficult thing to understand, where you have the original story and then you also have this new story that's layered on top, and then as a result you have to figure out the original story and then figure out the new story and then how they tie into each other. And I think that can be a challenge. If you're a Cage fan, you shouldn't be bothered by convolution stories. I mean, no, I mean, I have a hot take for Cage too. I guess my hot take with Cage is that I think that 4 should be an accessible title for newcomers, actually. So that's kind of my hot take with 4. And every time I say that, I get beat up on Twitter by Sora PFPs. No disrespect to Sora PFPs. But like there's people that don't like that idea, and they are like, no, if you want to play my game series, you need to like go back and play like 20 years of video games before I'll let you touch my video games. Like, okay, nerd, thanks. Unfortunately, I would like to see the series grow, and not be gatekept. And I think it'd be great if people could dive into Cage 4, which is a fresh start in the new saga. Yeah. But Trilogy being convoluted isn't adding to the story, though. To many, the current state of the story is lesser than the original. In that case, it begs the question of why. Why make things more obtuse and arguably worse for not only fans, but insurmountable to new consumers, or to newcomers, sorry. If it is possible to create a worse overall product, it's feeling more convoluted to be more convoluted. And meet the fan believes that these devs make ultra complex stories. I don't like. That's what I'm saying, right? And it's hard for me to preemptively speak on it because maybe there is some sort of genius payoff, like for it all, like that is happening here. But it's hard to say what that is without part 3 at the moment. But right now, as things appear, it does feel like it creates a barrier for anyone who would want to get into it, right? It feels like if you do want to get into it, you need to go do your homework first, which I think is really difficult when we're talking about creating like, you know, a 10 million plus seller, is telling people that homework needs to be done. And even if your marketing makes it clear that you don't need to do the homework and you tell people that, I think that there is a huge problem whenever fans of the game don't feel that way themselves and they're telling people like, no, it's not a good starting title. No, you need to go play OG. No, you need to play Remake first, right? And of course that same thing happens with Kingdom Hearts as well. And I mean, with Kingdom Hearts, it makes a lot more sense because it definitely is the case. And I mean, with Rebirth too, it does make sense too. And I think that having that barrier there, like, you know, it filters people out. You know, even if you are the company are saying something different, when you have all of the fans, the people that, you know, people actually talk to and believe, then that's the issue, right? Like, we trust our friends more than anyone, right? We trust the people around us. And so, you know, if Square Enix or, you know, company A, company B, whoever, arbitrary company says, oh yeah, you can play this game without having played any of the other ones, right? But if I ask my brother, or if I ask my friend or family member, whoever, right? Twitter mutual. Those are probably the people I'm going to trust on that topic. And they're going to tell me what they think. And in the case of something like that, they'd probably say that you need to go consume all this media first before you get it. And then that would be the course of action that I take. And so I think that creates, again, just a huge barrier for anyone who wants to get into it, because it's basically saying that, like, yeah, if you don't go do all that first, you can't just hop into it. And I think that when you look at like the series of games where a title shot up like hugely, like The Witcher or Mass Effect, God of War 4, right? God of War 2018, where you had a title that was very late in the game that shot up sales-wise exponentially. It was always because this is a great first title for you to do. And it's like, you don't necessarily need to play all those other titles. You can just play this one and have a really good time. Right? And not just because the company said that. For example, did CD Projekt Red say that you can start with The Witcher 3? The answer is, I don't fucking know if they said it. I don't know if they said it. Did they say it? Right? But I do know all my friends said it. I do know that everyone I talked to said it. And like, yeah, if you want further context, you should probably go back and play 1 and 2, but you don't really need it. You can just hop right into Witcher 3. Like, cool. You'll get everything. Yeah, Nier Automata, right? Like, if you've played Replicant, you will get Near Automata in a much more profound way. But you could just play Automata, right? Half the people playing Automata didn't even know Near Replicant existed. They didn't even know that was a thing. They just played Automata. And they got it. And they loved it. God of War, right? Like, God of War sold 23 million units. God of War 2018, that is. God of War 3 sold like 5 million units, right? So you have almost 5 times as many people playing it, which means the vast majority of people playing God of War 2018, that was their first God of War. Right? And again, I don't even know. I actually don't know if Sony Santa Monica said God of War 2018 is a perfect starting point. I actually don't know if that was said. I'm pretty sure it probably was. It probably was in 2018's marketing, but I actually don't know. I actually don't know definitively. But it doesn't matter because all the people surrounding God of War told me, yeah, you can hop in. I mean, I had played God of War before that, but you know, everyone around God of War was basically saying that, like, yeah, 2018 is a pretty good starting game. And so people hopped into it, right? And so, yeah, like when it comes to Rebirth, I think that's kind of a huge bottleneck for it, is that, or just Re-Trilogy in general, is you have so many people that are going to deter you from really getting it, right? Is that people are going to tell you, no, the plot twist is that it isn't a remake, it's a sequel. And, you know, whenever you have that word sequel there, you have this thing that basically tells people, oh, I can't instantly access this. I need to watch the first thing or play the first thing before I can do this. And so, yeah, I think that's a thing where if you have the kind of thing where you can just tell people, like, yeah, you can just start this and it's fun. You can be in on this. I think it's good. And I think that it would be great if KH4 could be that for Kingdom Hearts, where it's just like, oh, you never played Kingdom Hearts before? Oh, dude, you should pick up Kingdom Hearts 4. Like, you don't need to know anything about those other games. You can figure it out. Like, the game kind of tells you everything you need to know. You can look up some stuff, but like for the most part, like you can just play it and have a good time, right? Versus like, oh, you want to play Kingdom Hearts 4? Wrong. You need to go pick up 1.5, 2.5 HD collection, 2.8, and 3 plus 3 Remind. And you need to play all of those first. What do you mean it's not accessible? It's on everything. What do you mean it's not accessible? You can just go watch a 3-hour movie of a Nintendo DS game, bro. Like, people are thinking about accessibility in a fundamentally broken way when it comes to that series. They're just thinking about it like, oh, can you just access the game physically? That's not the issue. That is not even close to the issue. The issue is that nobody that isn't already knee deep in the Kingdom Hearts for decades wants to do that, dude. I know that you think, as someone that grew up with Kingdom Hearts 1, that playing it in 2024 is like hot shit, right? I am not going to convince, you know, my 13-year-old nephew who plays Fortnite that if he thought the new Kingdom Hearts game that he saw was cool, that wrong, you know, tell him he's wrong, and then he needs to go back and play a game that came out before he was born in order to get the game about the Disney boy with the giant key. Like, I think that is not... I don't think that is a good way to approach things, guys. Like, I think there's something wrong with that, right? Like, to me, what it is, what you do is that you make him play, or you let him play KH4 or whatever, and then he's like, that was the coolest game I've ever played, right? And then it's like, oh, you thought KH4 was cool? And then you roll out the collection of Kingdom Hearts games, and then you're like, buddy, there was like 20 other games that came out before this one. And then he goes, what? Oh, I want to play all the other games now and see how like all this came together. Because I'm like so interested in it now, right? Who are we talking? I'm using my nephew to make like a point about like why like KH4 and like games in general should be accessible, especially to younger audiences, because you're not going to convince them that they need to like go back and play video games before they were born in order to get like the new video game, right? And so my 13-year-old nephew, right? Like if I wanted to get him into Kingdom Hearts, like if I was to listen to KH Twitter, I would basically need to sit down and convince this Fortnite playing like 13-year-old that like, hey, like you can't access this even if you want to, because you haven't played, 20 plus years of a video game, and you're not going to get this. Like, is that really the way that like long term we should handle these franchises? And like, is that how the fan discourse should be? Or should it be like, should it be such that he can start with KH4, and then if he has fascination, he can work his way backward, right? And then when I talk about KH4 being accessible, I talk about it being accessible in the way that God of War 2018 is a super accessible game, in that you can start with God of War 2018, and you don't really need to have played any other God of War. Although that story does deeply connect to it, you can still pretty much know everything you need to know about it. Yeah, I hope it is a soft reboot. I think it'll be the most important thing that Kingdom Hearts could do at the moment, is be a soft reboot and allow anyone to get into it. KH1 is a retro game. Enjoy that sudden confrontation with your own mortality. You're welcome, Jack. Yeah, it is. It's technically a retro game now, right? And so, this is what I'm saying. Like when people gatekeep that stuff, and they're like, "Oh, all the games are available on all modern platforms. You can just go play it." But I'm just like, how do I convince? And not even just like, like a Zoomer or like Gen Alpha or whatever, but like, how do you go and convince like, even people that just play modern games in like their spare time, that they need to go spend like 100 hours diving through, cutscene movies, right? Or playing PS2 games. Magda Moogle, have a good night. In order to get like the latest game. And so that's a lot. That is a lot to do. And I think it's really difficult to convince people to do that. Right? I know that there are some people out there will be like, well, I did it, but I'm like maybe you did do it, but like is everyone going to do that? Is that a reasonable expectation? Is that something desirable to do? I don't think it necessarily is for most people. And so I think that like long-running video game series like this always need a new starting point for people to be able to get into, because I think it becomes like an unrealistic expectation for people to have kept up with decades of video game to be able to access the new thing. At least from the perspective of how much these video games need to sell in order to stay alive. I think that locking the franchise out from new people wanting to get in that way, that they have to go and do it in order, is hurting franchises more than it's helping them. Yeah. Like, it you can't expect everyone to get into things the same way you did. Um, so I think that's uh kind of the point there. All right, I think we'll call it a stream today. I have to go to the gym. We'll raid Schrodinger's baby seal on Twitch. I almost said YouTube. Oh my god. Did I not spell his name right? Oh my god. There we go. All right, you guys. Love you guys so much. We'll probably do another stream sometime by the end of this week, maybe on Friday. And we'll talk some more about these same topics. All right. Love you guys, and I will see you all next time.